I think the composer relies upon the individual to draw upon their own reactions to the content of the music. So again, it's that symbiotic relationship between the composer and the performer, obviously, so that helps you. And to be frightfully honest, frankly honest, just very honest with what you think the composer is trying to make an audience member feel, because that's one step further. So it's not my feelings about the music in that way. It's what we think is the composer's trying to generate, I don't know, in the emotional reaction of a listener. And it might be correct, it might be something different. And I've had cases and instances with composers where they've said, that's not the way I conceived the piece, but I like that a lot too. So I think composers feel like their pieces also are their own entity. They give birth to something and then they watch it grow, and sometimes they're surprised at the possibilities they had not considered when they wrote it. But back to the question is, I think if you go to the idea of how do I bring what I think he's trying to say to a third person, that adds a lot to it. And then if you can psychologically, philosophically, intellectually, whatever, come up with a description in your mind, and it might not be words, because words don't really serve it, but some imagery. Some people use storytelling, some people use visual reactions to what the human might look at in that state of emotion, their physical mannerisms, to try and depict sounds and changes in textures and sounds that will give an audience member maybe a glimpse into that same kind of emotion.
Yeah.
And then, if somebody comes up to you and says, wow, I never knew how deeply tragic or emotional or how questioning or whatever, if they relate to you in that way, you've known something good has happened.
There's also the conversation we've had a couple of times recently about the Hindemith Sonata and the article that you found. How sometimes what we see on the page is not, what they had in mind, or how to kind of reconcile those things. Now that you've seen that article, you can't go back and unsee it.
Right.
So, how has that kind of informed your teaching of these pieces, and kind of how you would approach or guide a student to approach studying a piece?
Just know that everyone has the same capabilities of understanding the music on an emotional level. And if you are that's not a good word, but if you're very honest with it, because I think that I keep using the word honesty, is that sometimes we refilter the music to what we feel we are good at and not good at. And I think sometimes music challenges us. But in the case of that Hindemith Sonata, where he illuminates the opening of the piece in a way that once you see it, it's more obvious, but you may not figure that out on your own.
Can you just briefly explain
what that is?
Yeah.
Well, it's the Opus 25 number 1 solo sonata for viola, and starts out with 2 identical measures of 3 strong chords. And he told the man who wrote the article in the lesson that he gave is that the first measure is basically a measure where he introduces these 3 harmonies, and then the piece really begins on the second measure. And most people looking at it would think of the 2 measures as one measure and then repeated, so that probably it's re-emphasized in a way. And sure, then you when you hear what he said is the first measure should sort of stand alone and then really begin the piece on the second measure, makes a lot of sense. But you have to be told that. So think about what we don't know about music. And there's so many instances where I've been absolutely sure what the composer was talking about and what he meant. And I get to the rehearsal with him and he goes, no. So, but if you can make a strong case for the music, again, it's like, it's not no, it's like, well, that's not the way I conceived it, but you brought out something that was there, obviously, that you thought of, but really just try and say something with every note you play. There's a reason that it's there. And don't just play notes, make some sort of meaning out of it. And that's why I said earlier is that we're all qualified. Everyone's qualified. And what I love about it is that there should be, with 4 people playing the same identical piece, there should be 4 very, very strong viewpoints of it that are personal and individual. So it's not about just respecting the composer's markings. That's kind of a limited thought, because you're probably wrong if you just follow directions. So, and the more, if the music's tender, the more of the sensation find within your own technique, the sensation of a sound becoming very fragile and intimate, or strong and bold and incisive, and all the things. That's what we have to work on, is practicing expressive technique.